Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Power Parsha Pearls. What do George Sampson, do you remember him, of Britain's Got Talent fame, Barack Obama, remember him, President of the United States, and Ronaldo, remember him, Portuguese soccer, football superstar. What do they have in common? You know, there's a small yet poignant section in the Torah which tells a story about a group of Jews who were unable to perform the Pesach sacrifice owing to their particular status during the initial Pesach celebrations. By definition, if it is the case that one found themselves to be ritually impure as a result of having come into contact with death, then God instructed that they would not be allowed to, in that state of impurity, bring the Pesach sacrifice. So you can well imagine the enormity of the upset if there were those who, for one reason or another, upon their exodus from Egypt, had found themselves in that sort of situation. And they were crying out to God or to Moshe, and they said, why should we be worse off? We too were part of the exodus. We also shared in the exhilaration of that all-defining moment. We also want an opportunity to express our joy and our gratitude before the Almighty. So why should we be denied this? We want to be able to do something. Moshe brings their requests and consults with God, who in turn presents them with what was henceforth known as Pesach Sheni, or otherwise the second Passover. Whereas the main Pesach that we celebrated is on the 14th of the Hebrew month of Nisan, the second Pesach is on the 14th of Iyar, exactly 1 month later. Thus, it enabled them time to purify themselves from that initial situation, and now they could bring the same Pesach sacrifice with matzah and maror, but it was a one-day affair, not a 7-day event. And the rest of the day didn't have the same restrictions of chametz, and it wasn't a festival per se, but 1 month after the initial event, they had real opportunity to be able to bring the actual sacrifice with all the same trimmings with it. Tomorrow is the 14th of Iyar, and we mark the occasion, many with omitting the tachnun, that is typically the penitence prayer that we leave out on any festive occasion, and indeed many have the custom to actually eat matzah as a commemorative gesture on the day as well. The simple question is this: why didn't God introduce this mitzvah in the first place? Why, when introducing the all-original laws of Pesach, doesn't God add an addendum to the original rules appertaining to the original Pesach? For 7 days you shall eat matzah, you shall bring a sacrifice that is to be roasted, you shall have no leavened matter, etc. Oh, and by the way, if you were unable to bring a sacrifice for whatever the reasons, don't worry. You can come back the next month and bring one on the second Passover that I will introduce. But God doesn't do that, does he? It's not given to the people at the time. It prompts them to have to first cry out and say, why are we worse off? And then Moshe brings that concern to God, who in turn responds and says, okay, here's the second Pesach. Is God merely responding to a complaint of the people? Or was the concept already all embedded within the wider realm of the Pesach concept, the Pesach laws? The answer is as profound as it is simple. When the odds are against you, there's always a chance to bounce back, but you have to want to. A second chance only takes on real meaning when it's initiated rather than merely offered. George Sampson lost Britain's Got Talent in that very first season. It wouldn't have made a whole lot of sense if someone would have simply invited him, come try again. He chose of his own accord to come back the following year to retry and indeed go on to win. It's the natural determination. I can do this. I can still make it happen. That's what makes that second chance so meaningful, so powerful, and indeed the recipe to win. Barack Obama lost out in all his early attempts to score in the political arena. In Chicago, where he started out, he was squashed as the underdog and written off as having little chance of ever making it into whatever kind of political ranks. But he bounced back and he became a senator. And he went on the roads to become effectively the most powerful man in the world. No one stood by and edged him up the ladder. Even his wife told him there's no chance. She didn't think anything of his prospects. She resented the time he spent on what she regarded as something of a waste. But from within, he had a dream, he had a vision, he had a resolve to see it through. You know, Ronaldo was told by his teacher more than once to give up the chase, as yet again he would walk into class late with a worn football tucked under his arm. She would simply say, "That ball won't earn you money." It's not as if somebody else turned around and said, "Oh, ignore her, yes it will." But the little voice inside him did. Sure, God may have had the mitzvah of the second Pesach stored in the pipeline, so to speak, but it required the initiative of the people. They needed to demonstrate a conviction, a desire to bounce back, to seize another opportunity, to make good on previous mishaps and prevail, to have that second chance. So God, in his infinite patience and absolute confidence in the people, he waited. In the end, they asked, and he granted. So here then is the question: what would you give for a second chance? If there was some point in your life journey where you could turn back the clock and do that over again, would you want to? I mean, I can't imagine there's anyone that doesn't have some interval in their life's experience that, given an opportunity, they would like to do it all again differently. How many of us have, when maybe having experienced the calamitous consequences of some foolish course of action, explained, if only I had a second chance, I would, whatever. Often life grants us second chances, third chances, fourth chances, and we either put these priceless opportunities to good use or hopelessly botch and squander them. The fact is, we all stumble, we all make mistakes, and we all inevitably yearn for another chance. In early childhood, the episodes are far and few. As a kid, you can go on to your yearly visit to the dentist. The hygienist gives me a lecture on the proper method of flossing and brushing. When the cleaning exposes a cavity or worse, you suddenly become insightful about what you should have been doing daily for the past year. If only I had a second chance, I would have brushed better. As an adolescent, they're equally as infrequent, though perhaps with more serious consequences. You sit for an exam only to barely scrape by with a disappointing mark, and you consider, if only I would have revised a bit more, studied a little harder, paid better attention. As an adult, the list of if only goes on at length. You could be repeatedly warned to back up your computer data, warned not to invest in that business, not to take that job, to check out your health, but life passes us by. We're too much in a rush, and then we replay the scenes over and again in our mind, getting lost in a world of fantasy, imagining things to be different until you snap back into reality. But the common denominator of all these incidents is that when we are given a second chance, we need to make sure that we don't squander that precious opportunity. We have to come to realize that we cause those tomorrow's if onlys regrets by today's neglects. There was a little boy who was overheard praying, "Dear Lord, if you can't give me a second chance and make me a better boy, don't worry about it. I'm having a really good time like I am." To be sure, people shouldn't have to resort to second chances. You want to score first time around. After all, right? It's first impressions that count most. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. Think about that. Nevertheless, there are times when you give it your all, but circumstances are beyond your control. And it is then that you can either choose to cave to the criticism, give up in the face of defeat, or say simply, I can do this. No matter how far life pushes me down, no matter how much I might hurt, I can always bounce back. You know, even in mysticism, there is a concept called Yerida L'Tzarech Aliyah, which translates to mean a descent for the sake of a greater ascent. By definition, a hard fall means a high bounce, if you're made of the right material. And one story that wonderfully illustrates this concept of a second chance is that told about a man whose relationship got so bad that he just wanted to be rid of his wife. So he consulted his rabbi. The rabbi listened very sympathetically, and he told him, "Listen, I have the perfect solution for you. The Talmud says, or it's brought somewhere, if you pledge money to charity and you don't pay it, you could be punished with the possible termination of your spouse. All you need to do is promise an exuberant amount of money to the shul, don't pay the pledge, and by next Rosh Hashanah, your wife's fate might be sealed." So the man goes to shul on the Shabbos, makes an enormous pledge. Knowing him to be what he is, the wardens come around that same night to collect, and he laughingly closes the door in their face. From that point onward, he's watching his wife very carefully and very intently every given moment. He's just keeping a really careful eye on her. She's eating breakfast. Are you feeling okay, honey? And every day, dinner, did you have a good day? Are you feeling fine? I mean, days go by, months go by, nothing. So he goes back to his rabbi. He goes, I don't get it. It's not working. The rabbi thinks a moment. He goes, I know why. It's only meant to work as some kind of punishment. But if you don't like her in the first place, it's not a punishment, is it? So I suggest start buying her gifts and winning favor in her heart. And once you start to like her, the punishment will kick in and your unpaid pledge will achieve its objective. So he goes home, starts buying her gifts, starts treating her nicely. In a matter of time, his wife, in turn, is overwhelmed by his sudden change of attitude, his warmth, his generosity. So she reciprocates by cooking him his finest dishes, acting so adoringly towards him. Before you know it, they've rediscovered their love once again. His life, so seemingly ruined, suddenly becomes bliss once more, only suddenly one day she takes ill. He goes running to the rabbi. What do I do? What do I do? She's taking ill, but I love her again. I don't want to lose her. And the rabbi smiles and says, now go pay up your pledge. By the way, don't try this at home. All of Judaism is established upon the principle of second chances. The whole notion of teshuvah, repentance, is built upon that premise. Without it, there'd be no Yom Kippur. We'd be crushed under the burden of our errors, knowing that we could never fix it. Life, in fact, would have begun and ended with the very first man. Did you know that Yom Kippur was in response to the sin of the golden calf? The Jews sinned. God was going to wipe them out. They begged forgiveness, a second chance. And it was on the 10th of Tishrei that forgiveness was granted. Henceforth, that day was enshrined as the Day of Atonement. But then there are those who say, it's too late. I'm too far gone. I'll never be the same. How many times have we heard those words? Or worse still, maybe said them? Frankly, if I was the editor of the Bible, I'd have left that golden calf story out. I mean, how humiliating for the Jews. Just weeks after the greatest revelation of all time, when they saw and they heard God up front and personal, they go and bow down to a golden cow. How fickle can you get? But the Torah is unflinchingly honest and records this most unflattering moment of ours in all of its gory detail. Why? Perhaps because the very important lesson we need to draw from that embarrassing episode is, firstly, that people do sin. Human beings do mess up. And even inspired Jews who saw the divine with their own eyes can make mistakes. They can mess up badly. But secondly, even afterwards, there's always hope, no matter what. There's always a second chance. We can all rehabilitate. In that same episode, God tells Moshe, go carve a second set of tablets, replace the first that you broke. Sort of, you broke them, you fix them, and now go ahead and make it better. So the story recorded is not intended to diminish our respect for that generation, but to help us understand human frailty, our moral weakness, and the reality of relationships, spiritual or otherwise. God gave us a perfect Torah. The tablets were handmade by God, pure and sacred, and then we messed up. So is it all over? Is there no hope now? Are we beyond redemption? After all, what could possibly be worse than idolatry? We broke the first two commandments, and the tablets were shattered into smithereens because we were no longer worthy to have them. So the Torah teaches us still, all is not lost. As bad as it was, and it was bad, you can still repair the damage. Moshe will make new tablets. They may not be quite the same as the first, though there will be tablets nonetheless. We can pick up the pieces. You know, I once heard a colleague speaking about the significance of breaking a glass under the chuppah. Besides the usual that we know, not forgetting Jerusalem, praying for its full restoration, the ceremony teaches a very important lesson about life to a bride and groom who are about to embark on their new journey in life. What happens immediately after the groom breaks the glass? Everybody yells out, Mazel Tov. And that's the message. Something broke. It's not the end of the world. You can even laugh about it, still be happy. We can yell out Mazel Tov. This too shall pass. A very practical peacekeeping tip for the young couple. There are most definitely second chances in life. It's possible to pick up the pieces. Whether in our relationship with God, our marriage partners, our kids, our colleagues, we can make amends, we can fix the damage. If the Jews could recover from a golden calf, our own challenges are small indeed. So the whole second Pesach ceremony conveys to us that it's never the case that we could say, you didn't give me another chance, it's not fair. It's more often the case that we go looking for it when it's almost too late. We have a chance in life, all through life, to make things right. There will be countless opportunities that come knocking at my door, which call to me to better express myself, to make my impact, to exploit my talent, to seek out my purpose. But if I ignore the call, if I squander the chance, I'll never reach my goal. The difference between a success and a failure is that a failure makes excuses and gives up after the first time. A success makes a plan and perseveres until mission accomplished. Life comes with all its challenges, and nowhere more so when it comes to personal growth, emotional growth, spiritual growth, and development. There are intervals in our lives when we look to scale the mountain, but sometimes in the process, we find it burdensome, too difficult, and we give up partway. Sometimes we don't give up, we simply fall off and can't be bothered getting back. Pesach Sheni, the second Passover, says, you can get back up. You can resume the climb, however many chances are necessary, however many chances it might take to make the trek. Ultimately, you will reach the summit, but it has to come from you. You have to want to. So friends,